This Soviet dictator called himself a man of steel. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be learning more about the life of Joseph Stalin. Yosef Vissarionovich Jugashvili was born December 18, 1878 in Gori, Georgia of the Russian Empire. Following his humble upbringing, he entered divinity school at 16 to become a priest. However, by 1899, he was kicked out due to his increasing interest in Marxist writings. After discovering Vladimir Lenin's works, Stalin became heavily involved in underground revolutionary movements. By 1903, he joined Lenin's Bolsheviks, which later became the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Stalin risked incarceration daily to propagandize and organize action, and his record got him exiled to Siberia several times. Around this point, he adopted the name Stalin, which in Russian meant steel. Lenin recognized Stalin's contributions by appointing him to minor posts within his party. During 1917's Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks snatched government control, and this allowed Stalin to further increase his value. At the start of the Civil War in 1917, Stalin became the People's Commissar for Nationalities Affairs and was eventually appointed to the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, or Politburo. The Bolsheviks won the Russian Civil War and aimed to expand their power in Europe by initiating the Polish-Soviet War in 1919. Stalin's rivals criticized his choices during that war, but he redeemed himself during 1921's Red Army invasion of Georgia. Lenin then gave Stalin more power in 1922 by naming him secretary for the reigning Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Soon after, Lenin suffered a stroke. Stalin acted as his go-between, but their relationship suffered until Lenin died of a heart attack in 1924. Stalin then began his ascension. He discredited or purged rivals and intellectuals who stood in his way, like Leon Trotsky. Eventually, he was heir apparent to Soviet leadership, and by the end of the 1920s, he effectively took control of the government as dictator. In 1928, he began releasing a series of 5-year plans for the national economy of the Soviet Union, which quickly increased industrialization and impelled communal farming. The Soviets prospered during this period, while capitalist countries suffered through the Great Depression. However, Stalin's reorganization ultimately cost millions of lives due to famines, murder, and the USSR's network of forced labor, referred to as Gulag. The late 1930s was characterized by the Great Purge. This terrifying period saw the population subjected to such indignities as police scrutiny, deportation, incarceration, and random murders. In 1939, at the outset of World War II, Stalin and Hitler signed a non-aggression pact. Within 2 years, it became evident to everyone but the Soviet dictator that Hitler was readying to renege on that promise. Stalin and the Soviet Union were then shocked by the eventual attack. Soviet forces suffered tremendous casualties until the end of 1941. This, in addition to the purges he carried out during the 1930s, meant the Red Army was lacking power and great minds. However, Stalin finally assembled a defense. In 1943, the Red Army turned the tide against Nazi Germany and began freeing Eastern European countries. While this victory did result in massive Soviet casualties, Stalin remained steadfast. Towards the war's end, Stalin joined his other Big Three counterparts, Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and showcased his impressive negotiating skills. He successfully argued to keep countries his Red Army had liberated within Soviet power and secured 3 United Nations seats for his state. By this point, the USSR was a respected world power. Stalin led into the nuclear age and became increasingly mistrustful. This was exacerbated in the early 1950s by the Doctors Plot. This conspiracy suggested a group of primarily Jewish doctors was working together to murder important Soviets. This revelation caused Stalin to begin readying for another purge. However, on March 5, 1953, he died without being able to implement his plan. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev challenged Stalin's accepted legacy by condemning him and his cult of personality. While Joseph Stalin is remembered by some for his contributions to Soviet industry, others decried his repressive methods and painted him as one of the most deadly dictators in history.